you're doing. Did you see, now I've been talking about this for a long time up here, how the government workers aren't coming into work, and the Lansing Chamber of Commerce put out a letter, which they gave to me, which we'll have to share with Beth, but they sent me this letter. They sent it to me a few weeks ago, calling on the governor to let the state workers come back to work, and they sent it to the whole quadrant, and nobody's reported on this letter. And I posted it on my Facebook. You can find it on there. But we'll send it out to the press, because this letter, the Lansing Chamber of Commerce is now saying, please bring the government workers back to work. And you know, Beth did a great job reporting this. You saw Gavin Newsom is now calling the California workers back to work. And so, you know, we're going to work very hard to encourage Governor Whitmer to bring the Michigan State workers here in Lansing back to work. I mean, you look outside, it's a ghost town. All of these government workers are working from home, and we don't know where they are. And meanwhile, every small business here is closing. I mean, the Grand Traverse Pie Company closed. You know, they're all closing. I mean, it's really tough. I mean, just to see all the things that are closing here. So we want the government workers to come back to work, and Jay DeBoyer is going to make that happen. We're going to start looking very closely at where the government workers are in the Oversight Committee and through our Appropriations Committees. So well done on that story. That was a really good story, and more people should be talking about it. I mean, I saw Indiana, they're bringing the government workers back to work. A lot of states are bringing them to work. So, you know, Governor Whitmer should bring the state workers back to work. I mean, you know, they give, I mean, how backwards is this? They give tens of, what was it? How much money did they give the city of Lansing? What was it, 20 million or was it 200 million? It's probably 200 million. It was in the story. So hundreds of millions of dollars they're giving to Lansing. Sarah Anthony always takes care of Lansing. Lansing got a lot of money in that budget, and some of it was for, you know, the effects of the effects of the state workers not being here. Well, rather than give them money, we should just bring the state workers back. Then we don't have to give the city of Lansing money for the, you know, dealing with the state workers that have left. So yeah, I think that's really smart. And you know, I've read all kinds of stuff, but I see Sarah Anthony, who's the ultimate Lansing insider, who is trying to lecture me on being a player up here. You know, I don't need to prove to Sarah Anthony anything, and I'll just say this, I'm not going to be a part of Sarah Anthony's Lansing Good Old Boy Club. I'm just not going to do it. I mean, Sarah Anthony, we all know she takes care of Lansing, but with that said, I'm not going to be part of this Lansing Old Guard Club, right? We're creating new rules. They're new rules, and really I'm the leader of the anti-establishment here. People don't like what's been going on in Lansing for years and years and years, this good old boy system, which Sarah Anthony really personifies. So I'll just say this. Look, I mean, when we got ESTA done, the earned sick leave, and Sarah Anthony wasn't in the room. Garland Gilchrist isn't in the room. You want to talk about somebody who is really exaggerating his accomplishments? Talk about Garland Gilchrist. I mean, I watched this video, and it's like, I created the Innovation Fund. No, you didn't. This guy didn't do anything. You know, he had nothing to do with that. You know, I would say Greg Van Werkum created the Innovation Fund. He was one of the leaders in that, one of our House members who did a great job. And Governor Whitmer came along, but you know, Garland Gilchrist is not in the room for these discussions. And then I saw him, I saw one of the comments he gave recently. He said, you know, I've been at the table in the negotiations with Governor Whitmer. No, he isn't. I mean, I've been here, since 2019, and I've actually negotiated real deals. And Garland Gilchrist was nowhere near them. So, you know, he's a nice guy, and I learned a lot about him. I mean, I guess he's an engineer, but he has nothing to do with what happens up here. He's really just a figurehead, honestly, a great guy, and he presides over the Senate, and he attends a lot of meetings, but he doesn't have any idea what it's like to be in the negotiations. I'm actually in the negotiations, right? And we saw that with the earned sick leave and the tip credit, where I saved the restaurant industry. The House Republicans, we saved the restaurant industry and the restaurant workers. We saved earned sick time for every Michigan worker, but we ensured that they have a job. We did really critical things that made the lives better of every Michigan worker and every employer. So those are real negotiations that had a very large effect. So I don't need to be lectured by Sarah Anthony about what it takes to be a player up here in Lansing and to get things done. I've demonstrated that this year, something she hasn't done. I don't even think they've sent us a book closing yet. We sent them a book closing, you know, but we're saying we're tying that to a government shutdown prevention plan. Stop with the games. I mean, you look at Mallory McMorrow. I mean, since October, she's been talking about shutting down the government. There's nobody who wants to shut the government down more than Mallory McMorrow, just to prove herself right, and these Senate Democrats. So we sent them a book closing, and we tied it to some of the most important functions of government, and we said, we can fund it now in March. We can listen to our school districts, we can listen to our local governments, we can give them that assurance now in March. These are not the controversial parts of the budget. We can fund it now, and we can take those things off the table so the Democrats like Mallory McMorrow will not be using these things as political pawns in a government shutdown game. We can stop that now in March, and then we can move forward on working line by line in the budget to go through the rest of the budget. But for anyone to say that this is the Republican budget is absolute false, and I give you all credit. Most of the reporters didn't fall for those lies. This is a government shutdown prevention plan designed to fund the most critical parts of government and give that assurance that, hey, in next September, October, you're not going to be part of this government shutdown that the Senate Democrats and Mallory McMorrow are planning. You're just not. We can give you that assurance now. And one thing that Mallory McMorrow and the other Democrats are doing is they're using, like, our police, our state police, our veterans homes, our National Guard, our kids, as pawns in this game, where they're saying, unless you fund these very unpopular things, then the schools will close, the veterans homes will close. That is absolutely false. We can fund those things, and then we can have a conversation about everything else in the budget. That's why we're going to have a long budget process that goes all the way until September 30th, and we're going to get a deal. But let's stop you scaring people along the way, and that's why we offered that government shutdown prevention plan, which was a bipartisan vote in the House. We have a very brave Democrat, Karen Whitsett, who actually represents her district. And I think all of these House Democrats are really going to regret their leader and their vote because, I mean, they voted to close down veterans homes and local governments and courts and schools, and, you know, they voted to not fund those things. And there was nothing else in the budget except for those things. You can support funding those things to stop a government shutdown, and then you can work through a budget process after that to ensure that every program is looked at, and in an environment where government grew 43% under Governor Whitmer, you know, we need to look at these things and ensure that these programs are working, and then we need to take Governor Whitmer's ideas. She has some new ideas, and we need to evaluate those against everything that's in there and fund the ones that have the most merit and get the best return on investment. I'll just say, you know, you look at what's going on this week. There's a lot going on today. The first thing is I think you're going to see the House committee, the Finance Committee, move through a bill to reverse the Democrat income tax hike that took effect last year. I mean, it's amazing. When Democrats grew government 43%, they needed to raise the income tax to do it. And as you all know, the income tax went up last year. Democrats did that. Well, Kathy Schmaltz has great legislation that's going to move through the House Finance Committee today to reverse that Democrat income tax hike and bring it back down to where it should be, 4.05 income tax rate. I mean, the fact that today government has grown as much as it has and they're still raising taxes, it's out of touch. And it's one of the reasons the Democrats lost the last election when the Michigan House was the only chamber in the country that flipped. Well, many states, what they did, even blue states, they took their state surpluses and they invested in infrastructure and they lowered their income taxes. What Michigan did is Michigan blew it all on pork projects for politicians and big corporate giveaways. And here we are. It's amazing. The next thing is there's great work going on in the Election Integrity Committee. Isn't everyone happy? It's called the Election Integrity Committee. We finally are bringing election integrity back to the state of Michigan. And there's great work going on in that committee led by our floor leader, Brian Posthumus, who's moving that legislation to require an ID to vote. Very simple concept. People agree you should show an ID and you should prove your citizenship to vote. It makes a lot of sense. So Brian Posthumus is doing a great job on that. We saw that moving through committee today. And then I want to talk, well, also we have the roads funding hearings today. I mean, you look at this and we all know Governor Whitmer said that I'm the only legislative leader she served with who has the guts and the brains to introduce a roads funding plan. Well, that includes some of these Democrat leaders that she served under, so I'm the only one that has the guts and the brains, because there were Republican leaders and Democrat leaders, and not one had the guts to actually introduce Governor Whitmer's 45-cent a gallon gas tax increase plan. So really, I think this might be the first roads plan that's been introduced that was called for by a legislative leader. And so I think what's critical about this roads funding plan that you're going to see hearings on today is, number one, Governor Whitmer and I agree on half. We agree on $500 million in cuts, and we agree on taking all of the money collected at the pump and dedicating that to roads. All of it. Every dollar collected at the pump goes to roads. We agree on that. That's half of the solution, $1.5 billion right there. Now you see in our plan, we backfill the school aid fund with the sales tax, and we do that to ensure that schools are fully funded. Governor Whitmer has a different way that she does it. Now, mind you, I have not seen Winnie Brinks or the Senate Democrats. They have no plan. So we're working off of, a Republican plan led by me and the House Republicans, and a Democrat plan led by Governor Whitmer. And so the other $1.5 billion is where, the conversations are going to happen. And I really believe, because of the great relationship that we're building with Governor Whitmer, that we'll be able to solve that and we'll come up with a roads funding solution. Finally, something that's evaded her entire 6 years. I challenged her to put a plan on the table, and she did. And now we can have real conversations about real plans. So you look at our plan, I think what's important about it is we dedicate the first $2.2 billion from the corporate income tax to roads. That money now is being given away to big corporations through the SOAR funds and the mega credits and all these things that are going to big corporations. We say, instead of prioritizing giveaways for the most connected corporations in Michigan, let's prioritize roads instead. Now, Governor Whitmer gets there through raising taxes on all corporations through the corporate income tax increase she's proposed. So I think the question before Michiganders is this: should we raise taxes on every corporation in Michigan, or should we just stop giving billions in free money to the most connected insider corporations in Michigan? If we just stop giving the money to the big corporations, we don't have to raise anybody's taxes. And as we're looking at trying to bring more companies to Michigan, tax increases are not going to do it. So we just stop giving money to the, 8 or 10 most connected corporations in Michigan, then we don't have to raise anybody's taxes, and we can ensure that we have good infrastructure. And when you talk about why do you come to Michigan, well, people want to come to a state with good infrastructure. We can do that if we fund this roads plan that we're putting forward. Now, I would just say, as part of that roads plan, we're dedicating the money to the local roads. So you look, 90% is going to the local county roads or the city or village roads. And we're not taking a big chunk of it off the top and spending it on like bike trails and mass transit. We're ensuring in our plan that the money goes to roads, and it specifically goes to local roads, the type of roads that you take from the driveway to the highway, right, in your local neighborhoods and communities. Those are the roads that we're focused on. In our plan, it's 50% county roads, 40% local roads, and 10% MDOT for the new money. MDOT is doing just fine because of all the borrowing Governor Whitmer did. And by the way, if you look at how much money it's costing Michigan taxpayers in interest for the amount of borrowing she did, that's a pretty staggering number. And that's the cost of not solving these problems earlier. Then the other thing I really wanted to focus on was education. I think you look at this, right? I mean, Democrats are running around fear-mongering about schools. That's what they're doing right now. But what we're doing is we're moving forward in the Education Committee on new reforms that will help fix our education system. I mean, you look, our reading scores for our kids are very low, unfortunately. We're falling backward in reading scores. We're not doing very well with our kids in math scores. Even Governor Whitmer in her State of the State said that we need to do better performance in our schools. I mean, Governor Whitmer even admitted in her State of the State that there is a problem with our schools and that we're not getting the right performance out of our kids, and that something's wrong and we need to do something to improve performance. I know Kyle really enjoyed that speech, but you remember her saying that, right? I mean, she even acknowledged, and it was something a lot of the press said was like shocking. The governor admitted that the schools have not been performing very well under her watch, but she also acknowledged that they're getting record spending. Now, you notice in the House Republican government shutdown prevention plan, we put record funding into schools with the Per Pupil Foundation. Now, I'll say this, I find this very interesting about Democrats. Now, remember the Democrats in the legislature. They voted to cut school safety funding 92%. And for the first time in over 10 years, they voted to not increase school funding with the Per Pupil Foundation allowance, okay? Then Republicans beat them in the election, largely on that issue, because we talked about that. We said for the first time in over 10 years, the Democrats in the legislature did not increase funding for schools, and they cut school safety mental health funding 92%, okay? Then we put a bill up that would increase the Per Pupil Foundation allowance, okay, and fund mental health and school safety, and every Democrat voted against it except for one brave Democrat, Karen Whitsett. But I question their credibility. These are the people that wouldn't give a Per Pupil Foundation allowance when they were in majority and gutted school safety and mental health funding, and then they're coming and complaining, oh my goodness, they're raising the Per Pupil Foundation, they're increasing funding for schools, oh, they're funding mental health and school safety. Why isn't this other stuff in there? Well, that stuff is coming through the normal committee process. We'll work through those things, but these most critical things, the Democrats still haven't figured out that those are the most important things to Michigan voters, is school safety, mental health funding, and an increase in the Per Pupil Foundation allowance, so that every school gets more money. And then you work through this other stuff, but it's not credible. These people, they opposed it then, they lost their majority, and they still oppose it. That's not news. But back to the education plan. I just want to talk through what we're doing this week, because we're leading on education policy. You're going to see this week some big things going on in terms of removing extra costs for teachers by waiving their fees for their teacher licenses and renewals. You're going to see expansions of teacher prep programs, and you're going to see what we call local certifications for teachers and administrators. So what this means is, you know, you hear a lot about teacher shortages and things, especially in rural areas. Well, you know, if you're in a community college, you can teach even if you don't have a teaching certificate. So like me, I could teach government class because I'm the Speaker of the House. I probably know something about government in a community college, but I can't in a regular school. If you're some kind of successful business person, you couldn't teach a class in a local school about business, but you could at a community college. So coming up with ways to certify new people into the education fields in areas where they have degrees and professional experience would help us, particularly in our rural areas, get more quality teachers into the classroom. But even in urban areas, I mean, imagine if you were in Detroit and you had you know, a homegrown local person from their community who became a successful business person that could come in and teach the class. I mean, that would be inspiring to a lot of people. So we want to expand the pathways to being an educator in Michigan and ensuring that our certification process is flexible. I mean, the governor talked about regulatory reform. This will help us get more teachers there, and really high quality teachers. If it's good enough for community colleges and to be adjunct faculty at universities, it's good enough for our K through 12 to bring in people with expertise and have them teaching courses that are relevant to their expertise. Now, I'm hearing that Democrats are probably unlikely to support this. It's a very strange thing to not want to bring more people who have unique life experience and expertise in these subjects into the classroom to teach our kids. I mean, the status quo is not working, right? You look at things we're working on next week that are part of our education plan, and I just want to lay this out. We came out with our education plan in September. We had worked on it all summer because we weren't here. Do you remember? Once we got to shared power, we were almost never here last year. And so we took advantage of that time to develop policy, and we developed this education plan that focuses on real life skills. Now you're seeing those bills introduced and moving through the House, okay? So we'll give you the one-pager, but we gave it to you in September too. Now you look at something that's really important as making sure the dollars go farther in education by doing efforts to expand consolidation of functions like administrative functions, like janitorial services, things like that. You know, expanding that list of things that can be consolidated in schools. And I would say that you look at Launch Michigan. You know, they really came up with this idea, and the Democrats year after year promised to fund it and never funded it, not once. But we're moving forward with it, both in a policy way and also as we're looking through the budget, is helping to make our ISDs more efficient by consolidating some of the local school administrative functions and services. That will provide better value for taxpayers. We're looking at, you know, this is a really important one, and Tom Kuhn is doing a great job with this, House Bill 4149. So Democrats repealed the A through F law. And then we hear Governor Whitmer talking about in her State of the State, we've given them more money than ever before, and their performance is dropping. Well, one of the ways that we need to fix that problem is by measuring results and making them widely available. And, you know, we probably should have made this part of HEAT, the Hall Ethics, Accountability, and Transparency Plan, the largest grassroots transparency movement in the history of Michigan, doing more transparency in schools. But it's not. It's part of our education package. And you look at this. So look, I listen to Democrats, and I try to understand the way they think, and it's hard. And I give you guys in the media some credit, because it's hard to understand these Democrats. They're so wacky. But with the schools, I would say they didn't like A through F largely because it actually gave a simple, easy to understand grade to each school. So, you know, oh my goodness, my school's a C, what does that mean? You know, so that was one of the parts of it that was very politically charged. I'm not trying to go back and relitigate the past. What the House Republicans are doing is we're trying to solve problems. So what we want to do here is, you may not know this, every school in Michigan there's a website where they have to post a bunch of information about their performance, okay? So what we want to do is we want to work with that existing website, and we want to make it work in a way where people know about it and can use it in the manner where it's actually helpful to measuring and comparing schools. And I think if we do that, we can improve the school performance, because whether it's the schools or whether it's the Whitmer administration, bureaucracy, what all these government workers do is they try to confuse and avoid measurement so that we can't really easily tell how they're doing at their job. And if you aren't measuring things and measuring performance, it's really hard to improve something. So what we propose is taking that existing website, first of all, forcing each school district to notify the parents that the website exists, because they're not notifying them now. How many Michigan families actually know that there's a website that measures school performance? None of them, probably. You did. Kyle knows, because he listens to everything that I say. But so there's a website. So what we want to do is make sure that the schools are notifying the parents. Okay. Secondly, we need a compare function on there. You go on it now. If you're trying to compare schools, it would take you hours. So there needs to be a function there where you could easily compare schools on it. We also want to put you want to put information about test scores on there. Okay. So how are they doing in their reading scores? How are they doing in their math scores? These exams they take, we want to have data on there so you could compare one school versus another based on these test performances. That's not on there. You could look and see what the school's budget is on there, but you can't see what their performance is on these tests. So we're going to work to make this website that exists something that people could actually use to determine whether their schools are performing well and to compare them to other schools, and to ensure that people know about this, how to check on the performance of their schools in their area and the ones their kids attend. We're not going to do it with letter grades, though, because before, letter grades were controversial. So let's give the information to parents and the people of Michigan. Let's do it in an easy to understand and easy to compare way. And then they can decide. I don't have to put my letter grade on it. I mean, how great would it be if there was more conversation about how these schools were performing, and the superintendent can make their case about, why they're performing well, and the parents can ask their questions, but they'll be informed with the information. So Tom Kuhn's doing a great job. Brian McGoal has some really important legislation to add these trade schools to dual enrollment. And when we're talking about focusing on real life skills, that's really important that, a lot of people go into the trades, so let's ensure these trade schools are counting toward their high school graduation. I think that'll be a really good thing. We want to bring into, and this started with this dyslexia bill that Kathy Schmaltz really championed, and Jamie Green, that got through and signed by the governor last year, where they started bringing back what we call evidence-based reading methods, which is phonics. We need to keep bringing back phonics if we're going to fix our reading scores. And so that opened the door, but we're going to drive right through that door with our new legislation and bring that back to our schools, ensure that our teachers are trained in it, and ensure that it's coming back to the schools. A lot of people agree with phonics, and you even heard Governor Whitmer mention phonics in her State of the State. So we open that door. Now we're going to drive through it and bring phonics and science and evidence-based reading methods to our schools. And then I would say we're also going to work to make this education curriculum more flexible. We're going to make it more flexible by changing the requirements, so things like Algebra 2 that are not as useful, we're going to ensure are part of the solution moving forward in education. We want We want to have more practical things that people will actually use as we focus on real life skills. So, you know, I guess we have a choice, right? We can listen to the Democrats' rhetoric about education, which is not backed up by facts and is false, or we can focus on the legislation that's moving forward this week, next week, the week after that, real concrete education solutions to change our education system and bring real life skills back. And this isn't just, let's just repeal what the other side did or put back in what they disagreed with. These are new ideas that I think are going to get bipartisan support. So I'll stop there, and you know, I don't know if there are any questions. It's okay if there aren't any questions.
That information picture, you're talking about SEPI, right?
I don't know all your acronyms. Is that what it is? Yeah, I don't know all these. The government has so many acronyms. You call it CEPI?
CEPI.
Yeah. You see what I mean? How would a parent know to go to CEPI? That could be quote of the day, but you know, you're going to just print whoever criticizes me today. That'll be quote of the day. No, I know. Well, I don't want a good line. I just think, even if it's a bad line, if they criticize me, it's MERS quote of the day. It's amazing. Yeah, Colin. I think we're going to hold a vote on it very soon. You know, it's important, right, to reverse the Democrat income tax hike, and it moved through committee today. Is that what you're saying while we were here? Did the Democrats vote for it? No. Wow.
3 holdouts, 2 no's, I
Three.
believe.
2 passes.
Yeah, they're afraid. 2 passes. Yeah. See, they raised the income tax, and now they're afraid of voting against reversing the Democrat income tax hike. But they need to learn. People care about the cost of living, and they don't like that their income tax went up. They don't like it. Any other questions? And so we're going to move on that very quickly because it's part of our budget, right? When Ann Bolin was up here last week, she talked about reversing the Democrat income tax hike, funding our roads without raising taxes, and delivering a budget on time, we hope. Once we get rid of all these Democrat games, delivering a budget on time that includes the income tax rollback and fixing the roads without raising taxes. But it's not going to include a lot of the corporate giveaways. Now, if Governor Whitmer wants to have a separate conversation about the giveaways for corporations, you know, we'll have that conversation. If the corporations want to pay for it, we'll look at it. Any other? Yeah, Jordan. You're doing a great job lately, Jordan.
To that same point, obviously Democrats did choose to not roll back the income tax. They're still in control of the Senate. I suppose what's kind of the MU or M thoughts here, considering it's not likely that they're going to take this up for a vote in the Senate? Potentially.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, rather than try to lecture other people about how to be a player in Lansing, you know, maybe the Senate Democrats should get on board the train that's going. I mean, you look at this. Governor Whitmer is for the first time in a long time, showing some leadership. She's talked about regulatory reform and licensing reform and permitting reform. And if you remember, we had Bill G. Schuette up here last week, something that didn't get covered much because there was so much going on last week. And we said, you know what, Governor? We're going to meet you right there. You're ready to talk regulatory reform, so are we. Regulatory reform, permitting reform, licensure reform. We got a report from Laura. Bill G. Schuette and the Rules Committee is going to go right to work on that. We don't know how long this window will be open, so we're going to jump right into it and try to solve that problem. If we could improve our regulatory and licensure system in Michigan, that will really go a long way in terms of making Michigan a place that people want to work and people want to bring their jobs. You look at the conversations going on roads, right? I have a plan, Governor Whitmer has a plan. House Republican plan, Governor Whitmer plan, and we're moving on our plan, right? We're having hearings. We're going to be moving these bills through the House. You saw education. We put out a plan in September. Governor Whitmer put out a plan. When was that, January? It didn't get a lot of coverage, but she put out a plan in January on education. That's great. So I think you can see there's a lot of great policy going on here, a lot of good policy work going on. And we're trying to meet them halfway. I don't believe that we should have a responsibility to close their books on their Democrat budget that they failed to do because they were pursuing a radical left agenda. It was hundreds of bills and most didn't get done, and they didn't close the books. And it's just like they didn't present the bills, they didn't close the books. It was a mess. I mean, it's great that there are adults now in charge of the Michigan House again because it was a mess that we inherited from these Democrats. So now that there's a real leader leading the House, you see Governor Whitmer coming to the table, and Governor Whitmer is showing some leadership again, okay? The problem is the Senate Democrats are still playing the same old games, right? That's why nothing got done the last 2 years. So my thing would be, we're proposing serious policy. Governor Whitmer is proposing serious policy. The Senate Democrats should get with it and engage in these conversations. And really, they should defer to Governor Whitmer because the only reason they have a Senate majority is because of Governor Whitmer. It's nothing to do with them. And so I'd say, you know, they should embrace her as their leader and they should support her in these negotiations because we could actually get more done than has been done here in Whitmer's entire administration if we can get the Senate Democrats to step up and become serious policymakers and serious negotiators in these conversations. They're the only ones that aren't doing it. I'm doing it, the governor's doing it, and I guess Ranjit Puri isn't doing it, but we have low expectations for him, you know. And many Democrats are saying to me that they actually think they made a mistake and they should have kept Tate. That says a lot. Yeah.
You brought it up a second ago, the bills that weren't presented.
Mhm.
I believe the judge ruled that there is a constitutional obligation to present the bills before 2 days of their enactment. It's April 2nd, so the deadline for March 19th. Just kind of curious where we're at. I know you said that you're still legally reviewing.
Yeah.
Any options, or if you could update us on what's going on, please.
Yeah, and you know, this was a very embarrassing loss for Winnie Brinks and the Senate Democrats. And I would say rather than suing their political opponents, and they wanted to serve me in front of the cameras, you saw that, and we saw what the judge said about that. But you look at this, they want to make a very political lawsuit. What is everyone else up here doing? Governor Whitmer is putting forward education plan, roads plan. We're talking economic development. You know, right, and the House Republicans are putting up major proposals on those things and moving forward. And these guys are suing their political opponents, talking about last year. I mean, we got to solve some problems here today. So, you know, we're doing a very thorough legal review, and that's ongoing. And I trust Andrew Fink to get us the right answer, and then we'll do what Andrew recommends. But you know, there's a lot that goes into the legal review, and looking at the judge's opinion is one of those things.
So you don't have any plans to deliver those bills by March 19th at this point?
Well, we're going to do a very thorough legal review, and you saw the Democrats had a very political lawsuit. It was an embarrassing outcome for them, and I have a lot of confidence in Andrew Fink as he's going through this, looking through a lot of information to make the right decision, and we'll see what happens. But we're still doing that legal review. I mean, you know, we might present them. We'll see. But we're going to look at what the legal review says. We're still deciding. Any other? All right. Well. Yeah. And now, which station are you with? Yeah, you do a great job. I told our people you're probably the best Capitol reporter, and what I like about you is you make everything about the local community and the neighborhood, and you're speaking to your audience. You know how it affects, what is it, Mason and these places, and you probably had the most fair and true and accurate story about the government shutdown prevention plan in your reporting yesterday. It was very, very on point and fair. You did a great job. So your people are very lucky. You know, if you'd like to come to the Grand Rapids market, where I live, you know, we could really use more reporters like you. So you did a great job. What? Yeah, no, she does a great job. It's always, I've watched your reporting for a long time. All right, any other questions? All right, you good, Kyle? Yeah. All right. Well, keep up the great work. We'll see you guys again soon.